ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, Your Excellency. Thank you everybody for being here. We're trying to stop the decline and reverse the decline, as Peter Thompson from the UN would say. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador Olivier Pavdarvan, Special Envoy of the President of the French Republic, for stopping the decline, by opening the 2 days of workshops and forums before the high-level segment on Friday. Thank you to all our eminent speakers for being mobilized to open this 2 days session with a very important workshop on ocean governance. We're very happy to have Peggy, Director of the High Seas Alliance, to be our conductor and moderator today, and she will introduce all the speakers. And then we'll have a session, because this is like conceived by the ambassador as a huge seminar of 10 forums, 10 workshops, where the aim is to interact and to come out with some ideas, some recommendations, some calls for actions in order to be a brick in the international agenda for at least these six first months of 2022. We are opening with ministers, all the workshops, physically present or digitally present. So we're very honored to play right now from His Excellency Augustos Santos Silva, the Minister for Foreign Affairs in Portugal, with opening remarks, which is very timely because we're building here a bridge towards Lisbon and the UN conference for the ocean. So thank you very much. Thank you, Peggy, for taking over once we start with the film. And I hope you'll have a pleasant and useful workshop this morning. Thank you.
L'objectif 14.
The implementation of this governance requires better knowledge, better monitoring, and better understanding of the maritime space so that economic activity can contribute to human development and ensure the protection of the environment. Portugal has defended the creation of a specific objective for the oceans right from the start. Objective 14, Target 14, which is a way to guarantee that oceans and the problems that afflict them are given sufficient importance. The UN Conference on the Oceans, which will be held in late June, will be held in Lisbon, co-organized by Portugal and Kenya. It will be a critical milestone where we will discuss the multiple questions that pertain to the oceans. It will be an opportunity to encourage countries to do more to implement and live up to their international obligations. The Ocean Science Decade in the service of sustainable development under the aegis of the UN is an opportunity not to be missed. This REST Summit is an opportunity to develop cooperation in order to protect our oceans, and this work will be consolidated in Lisbon and become an overarching strategy for the governance of the oceans based on the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. This protection has worldwide importance and universal relevance when it comes to the member states. And in the final declaration of the third conference for sustainable development, the international community pledged to create a legal framework for the protection of biodiversity and its sustainable use in those areas that lie outside national jurisdictions, which is the BBNJ process, as it's called. And the conclusion of negotiations on the BBNJ should be a priority for all of us. This will represent a milestone in efforts to achieve genuine governance of the oceans. We have a task to carry out, which is the negotiation of the new post-2020 biodiversity strategy, which includes protection of the oceans and the international goal of protecting 30% of the ocean environment. And there will be work done by the UN to assess the situation in the area of biodiversity, and a binding agreement will be signed intended to reduce plastic waste pollution and other ocean waste. We dearly hope that press will allow us to reflect upon the governance of the ocean and those measures which need to be adopted at the international level, and we hope that a roadmap will be hammered out in order to achieve Target 14. In June in Lisbon, at the UN Conference on the Oceans, this will all be brought to completion. We are looking forward to seeing you in a few months' time in Lisbon. Thank you very kindly for your attention.
Peggy? Peggy Callas.
So, bonjour et bienvenue, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs. Good morning and a very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, ocean friends, and to our audience wherever you may be, to this opening workshop of the One Ocean Summit on Ocean Governance and Responding to Change. I'm Peggy Callas, the Director of High Seas Alliance, and it's really a great pleasure to be your moderator here today. We gather here today with great appreciation to President Macron for his vision on the need for a high-level summit dedicated to the political mobilization and action for the ocean, perhaps the first international ocean meeting that many of us have been to in over 2 years, to kickstart 2022 with concrete action commitments and the important first step in a trilogy of high-level summits that should ensure continuity of action over the next 6 months, from Brest to our Ocean Palau, and then to the UN conference in Lisbon. So thank you, Minister Ladrian and Minister Santos Silva, for your inspiring words and strong messages. And special thank you to Ambassador Olivia Pavra-de-Arver and all the organizers of this summit, as well as the organizers of this panel, Ashok Adisio, Institut France de la Mer, CNRS, and Ocean Climate Platform. And of course, thank you to our host city, this beautiful maritime capital of Brest. So we are here to mobilize action on the ocean. Everyone gathered here today already knows that the preservation of our ocean is one of the biggest challenges that we collectively face. It is no longer a question whether the ocean is changing. Leading scientists have demonstrated through numerous high-level reports that the global ocean and its rich biodiversity are at the tipping point, and transformative change is needed to ensure that it can continue to thrive and function in its role to support billions of people who depend upon it for our food and livelihoods. The ocean is vital for the future of humanity, and the task of saving the global ocean is one that no government, company, or individual can achieve alone. In this workshop, we are joined by leading ocean scientists and experts, esteemed diplomats, and leaders who will provide their views on identified gaps in ocean governance, the tools available to effect the change needed, and what is our individual and collective responsibility for the global commons to benefit the ocean and thus humanity. So without further ado, I'm really delighted to introduce the chair of this workshop, Singapore's Ambassador for Oceans and Law of the Sea, Her Excellency Ambassador Rena Lee. Ambassador Lee wears many hats and serves as president of the UN Intergovernmental Conference on Marine Biological Diversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction, BBNJ, and is also a member of the Legal and Technical Commission of the International Seabed Authority, as well as the chief executive of the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore. Madam President, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Well, a very good morning to everyone, bonjour. And, you know, I'm very happy to be here. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me first thank the government of France for their kind invitation to me to participate in this summit and in particular this workshop on ocean governance. I make these opening remarks in my capacity as the president of the BBNJ negotiations, very long title, I'll just keep it short, which is my privilege to chair. This morning's workshop on governance is a very timely one, and we've heard the minister mention this and Peggy as well, as it kickstarts what promises to be a really packed year of ocean-related meetings, including the fourth session of the BBNJ negotiations that I know many in the audience have been waiting to start, and the UN Ocean Conference. In addition, this year also marks the 40th anniversary of the establishment of UNCLOS, our constitution for the oceans, the legal framework that governs our actions and our activities in the oceans. In the 40 years since the establishment of UNCLOS, we have seen several changes in the oceans, including, and some may say, particularly in the areas beyond national jurisdiction, which many view as one of the global commons of our Earth. It is against the backdrop of these stresses faced by the ocean, especially biodiversity loss, that the BBNJ negotiations take place in order to ensure the conservation and the sustainable use of biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. The Intergovernmental Conference has focused on developing processes and mechanisms in which the relevant actors may participate and which signpost how these various actors interact with one another. This recognizes that there are different actors, different processes and institutions involved in ocean governance, and that coordinated and coherent approaches are crucial to developing sound ocean governance policies. So it is helpful to work out the place of the BBNJ agreement in the universe of ocean governance and consider how different efforts, initiatives, and actions can mesh together to ensure real change. This is the wider context within which the BBNJ agreement will operate. To be clear, on their own, processes and mechanisms cannot resolve the challenges faced by the oceans. But what they can do is provide us with the means to halt the loss in biodiversity and the overuse of resources by establishing ways for all of us to come together, as in this room and live streaming from everywhere else in the world, involve the different stakeholders with their different areas of expertise in order to make informed decisions that will allow us to collectively implement transformative changes in the areas beyond national jurisdiction. Changes that can make a real impact and achieve real change in this ocean. And so we need to seize the opportunity to develop an effective agreement, one that is universal and implementable. That said, we should not lose sight of the fact that there are other ongoing processes which are tackling issues facing our oceans today. Today's workshop reflects this multifaceted nature of ocean governance, bringing together experts in a variety of fields, working on the different aspects of governance, including the legal, scientific, and policy issues. These experts will share their different perspectives and offer suggestions on what we can do. We may not always agree, but I hope that today's workshop will provoke discussions, spark new ideas, and ultimately drive action amongst us. I wish everyone a very fruitful workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for so eloquently setting the stage for our discussion today. And so now we're going to begin with our first panel discussion, What Ocean Change? During this first panel discussion, we will have a dialogue with our esteemed panelists who will share their perspectives on the current state of the ocean, in its biodiversity, and the services it provides, and what can and needs to be done in the context of the current ocean governance. Following each of the two panels, those of you in the audience will have an opportunity to ask questions as well. So to guide us through this ocean journey on our first discussion, we are joined by Professor Martin Visbeck, head of the Physical Oceanography Research Institute, GEOMAR Helmtholtz Centre for Ocean Research Kiel, and also a professor at Kiel University. Good morning, Professor. Secretary General Henry Puna, former Prime Minister of the Cook Islands, and currently Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum. Welcome, Secretary General Puna. Ambassador A.Webson will join us virtually. He's a permanent representative of Antigua and Barbuda to the United Nations and current chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, as well as Secretary General Michael Lodge, who's a barrister of Gray's Inn and also the Secretary General of the International Seabed Authority with decades of experience with multilateral negotiations. So we're going to start this discussion. Dr. Visbeck, I'd like to invite you to the lectern, and perhaps you can share your perspectives from a scientific perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Ministers, presidents, ambassadors, dear colleagues. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you a little bit of the scientific perspective that we have on the ocean. We all know that the ocean is important for humanities, and I might show some slides if that's possible. And the ocean covers 70% of the planet, it supports us for traffic, is important for our food resources, hosts the largest connected biodiversity situation on our planet. And on the other hand, we're looking at the ocean and we're learning from various assessments how the ocean is responding to stressors. Could I have the slides, please? Not coming up yet. And what we have at hand in the scientific community is experts' assessments. Oh, here they are. Okay, great. So I want to speak about ocean governance opportunities, and in particular from a scientific perspective. And I like that picture of the ocean, which has Antarctica in the middle, but that's not important, but it shows you that we only have one ocean. And I really like the idea of dropping the S. There's only one ocean to care about. And what we have is we have the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that looks at the ocean also from a climate perspective. We have the International Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystems that look at the biodiversity, and certainly we have the World Ocean Assessment that is supporting us there. And what we're seeing here from the IPCC's type of view, that we see enormous changes in the planet. Most of you know the planet is warming, in particular the ocean. 90% of the energy is in the ocean. That causes sea level to rise. The carbon dioxide that we have in the atmosphere changes the acidity of the ocean. We're seeing ocean acidification, but we're also seeing a loss of oxygen within the ocean. So many changes introduced from climate. IPCC is the go-to place for that. On the other hand, we're looking at the biodiversity of the ocean, very much an issue that we're discussing in BBNJ. And here, I think it's the connectivity between the biodiversity on land, in the coastal zones, reading right into the ocean. But if you look at the assessments for all the ocean basins, we are already seeing a decline of biodiversity everywhere, and it's going to get worse as we're going forward. So it's high time for action to think about how we can preserve the biodiversity of the ocean, and BBNJ is a very important governance process in that arena. At the same time, we have the World Ocean Assessment. The World Ocean Assessments take stock of what we know about the ocean from the fisheries, from the corals, from the deep sea biodiversity, but also looking at climate biodiversity. It is a little less well known than the other two assessments, but it's much more comprehensive, and it really looks at drivers of change and how the ocean is supporting coastal communities and really giving us the livelihoods that we enjoy as humans, and looking forward on SDG 14, for example, 2030 agenda, but I would say it informs the whole ocean dimension of the 2030 agenda, not just the one SDG 14 goal. So how do we know what we know? We have a need for another convention, maybe to really look at ocean sustainable development, because it's only partially covered in IPBES, partially covered at IPCC, and partially covered in the World Ocean Assessment. So thank you very much for listening to me. exciting times for ocean governance, more opportunities coming from the scientific world, and I'm looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you so much, Professor Visbeck, and certainly the digital twin sounds like a very promising tool to use for our future assessments and impacts, and hopefully we can hear more about it during the Q&A opportunities. So I'd like to now turn to Secretary General Puna, and to provide us a perspective of the Pacific Islands and small island developing states, or rather big ocean states, whose economy and well-being is so closely linked to the state of the ocean. And perhaps you can also tell us whether there are global solutions that can affect the change needed to address some concerns.
Thank you, moderator. Can I start off by saying all protocol is observed since there are so many VIPs in our midst this morning. Good morning, bonjour, Brest, kia ora, and bula vinaka. Last month, the world witnessed the biggest volcanic eruption in centuries from our Pacific region. From Tonga, the underwater eruption was felt thousands of miles away on the shores of Japan, Peru, and the United States Pacific coast. This disaster reminds us just how interconnected we all are, uniquely, inextricably with the ocean. As Pacific Ocean Commissioner and Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum, I represent an organization of 18 member states, stewards of over 40 million square kilometers of the Pacific Ocean. As the previous speaker said, our well-being as a region is linked to the well-being of our Pacific Ocean, an area which connects all people across our sea of islands. We are indeed the Blue Pacific continent. And the Blue Pacific is not just our backyard. It is our endowment from Mother Nature. The potential for the ocean to meet our sustainable development needs and aspirations is enormous. And our recovery in the face of COVID-19 is also dependent on its bounties. This is why our leaders of the Pacific Islands Forum has and continues to be so deeply committed to ocean governance. The 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, to be finalized later this year, puts valuing, respecting, and protecting and managing the ocean at its very heart. Ladies and gentlemen, as we have just heard, our ocean is not well. We, mankind, have destroyed it with our convenient lifestyles. In fact, we've treated it as a convenient disposal unit. And now, from pollution to delayed action, there are many threats that we have created and that we are responsible for. They jeopardize our current, our present, and undermine our children's very future. Recent geopolitical and geostrategic shifts have resituated the Pacific as a key strategic theater for great power rivalry. This geopolitical context adds to a wide range of environmental and societal changes, in particular climate change, which our leaders have recognized as the greatest threat to our people's livelihoods and security, as well as our region's identity and integrity. In the context of sea level rise, the issue for the Pacific raises the very fundamental question of the survival of a people. The potential loss of territory, jurisdiction, and sovereign rights would have far-reaching consequences for the region, including in terms of effective oceans governance. To this end, our leaders in August 2021 adopted the Declaration on Preserving Maritime Zones in the face of climate change-related sea level rise, which I will talk about on Friday. Friends, all states must play their part and abide by international law, including UNCLOS. The nature of the ocean implies that any action in your own waters can have transboundary impacts on other countries' waters and on our global commons. This is particularly true with marine pollution, including radioactive discharge. One solution supported by our leaders of the Pacific Islands Forum is for the expeditious finalization, adoption, and entry into force of a robust BBNJ agreement referred to by our first speaker. This instrument must have adequate teeth. It must break from the status quo of fragmented governance. Coordination, cooperation, and coherence means that we must all play our part and that proper accountability is implemented. Any effective governance framework must be rooted in the principles and vision of UNCLOS, in particular that of a just and equitable world. This is why provision of adequate means of implementation, including ocean finance, capacity, technology, and data, must be addressed. They must respond to the needs and priorities of the recipients, and especially for small islands, developing states, to support them in fulfilling their rights and their obligations. In closing, our Pacific people have developed values, traditional practices and methods, and spiritual connections with the ocean passed down from our forebears. These systems of traditional knowledge sit alongside the science, and both complement each other very well. In our experience, both are key to sustainable development and must inform policy, ocean policy at all levels, along with the best available current scientific information. And finally, the interests of the holders of such traditional knowledge must also be respected and upheld too. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I'll just launch the two next contributions, which are on video. We thank them very much. I'm just concerned by time. Since we're late for the ocean, we try to be on time for our workshops, our 2020 workshops. The next contribution is from Ambassador Walton A.Webson, the permanent representative of Antigua and Barbuda to UN, and he'll be followed by a contribution by Michael Lodge from Jamaica, Secretary General, International Seabed Authority, before we enter in the next topic with Peggy. Thank you.
Colleagues, good morning. First, let me thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity to share some reflections from the perspective of small island states. Colleagues, this year, as we commemorate the 40th anniversary of the adoption of UNCLOS, it is also important to reflect on some of the gaps and the recent developments in marine governance. With the advancement in marine science and research, we now understand the far-reaching impact these activities have on oceans. Therefore, it is critical to have regulatory measures to ensure such activities are carried out sustainably. While we have set global targets and goals to address these issues through various international frameworks, including the 2030 Agenda and the Samoa Pathway, there, my friends, continue to be gaps in governance which hinders progress in global implementation. There is still no holistic legal regime for high seas governance, and different organizations currently manage various aspects of the varying scopes and mandates. For the last decade, my friends, we have been deliberating on a global instrument on BBNJ to address these gaps comprehensively. We had almost reached the finish line when the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted our procedures. We needed to urgently revive this momentum to conclude a robust instrument that enables conservation and ensures sustainable use of areas beyond national jurisdiction. My friends, this should include provisions for conducting effective environmental impact assessments for activities and establishing comprehensive marine protected areas in the high seas. It should also include equitable access and benefits sharing from marine genetic resources, considering the needs for capacity building in countries such as small island states. Another critical gap exists when it comes to regulating marine plastic pollution. Existing national, regional, and international efforts have failed to mitigate the exponential increase in plastic pollution, deteriorating the marine environment and posing risks to human health. Following the discussions by the ad hoc open-ended expert groups on marine litter and microplastic at the UNEA, there has been significant convergence on the need to launch an intergovernmental negotiating committee on plastic pollution. In this context, AOSIS has called for support for a mandate resolution to be adopted at UNEA 5 to start deliberations on a legally binding instrument aiming to prevent, reduce, and eliminate plastic pollution, including...
I'm concerned of time. We stop with this call for action on plastic pollution, and we thank Ambassador for listening, I'm sure, from far away. And I would invite Michael Lodge to contribute as well, since we need to progress on this discussion before Peggy moderates the Q&A on this topic. Is that okay? Thank you.
I wish first to thank the Government of France for inviting me to contribute to this discussion on behalf of the International Seabed Authority. The deep seabed, covering 54% of the global ocean, is the only example that we have of a global commons that has been set aside to be managed internationally for the common good. Today, this space is the frontier for cutting-edge marine science, technological innovation, and deep-sea exploration. The prospects offered by this new frontier, which is the common heritage of all mankind, are enormous. The research being undertaken will enable us to better understand our planet and further develop a sustainable future. The rich mineral deposits found on the seafloor and the biodiversity associated with them also create exciting opportunities for sustainable development. At the same time, we need to acknowledge that the pressures on the marine environment created because of our dependence on the resources provided by the ocean are real. They also present a challenge for effective governance and management. In this context, the authority represents a unique experiment in civilization. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea established the authority as the organization responsible for managing this vast area of ocean space. The regime for the deep seabed lies at the heart of the entire system of global ocean governance under the Convention. It could easily have failed. However, today, this comprehensive governance system has the full and active support of 168 states parties, as well as the participation of 94 observers. The fact that the members of the authority came together in December 2021 in Kingston, Jamaica, amply demonstrated their trust in this governance system and its resilience. Without the authority, we could easily have seen rampant, unrestrained exploitation of the deep seabed. Instead, we have the benefit of 40 years of carefully managed deep sea exploration, which has massively expanded our collective understanding and knowledge of the ocean at large. We've also seen the progressive development of a sophisticated and balanced legal regime, open to equal participation by developed and developing states, anchored in the precautionary approach, transparency, and equity, and fully aligned with the Agenda 2030. A recent independent report issued a few months ago, after extensive multi-stakeholder consultation, determined that the authority makes a meaningful contribution to 12 of the 17 SDGs. This year, we will celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Convention, which gives us an opportunity to reflect on how much has been achieved so far, as well as to look forward to shape future discussions on ocean governance and the sustainable development of the ocean and its resources. The Convention remains the foundation for all human activity relating to the ocean and its resources, and is the best guarantee for peace and good order in the ocean. What is important now is to reinforce our collective action to ensure that this framework is respected and reinforced, and that the institutions created for its implementation are respected, strengthened, and not undermined. I thank you very much.
So thank you, and this now opens our question and answer period, and I'm going to take the liberty as the moderator to actually pose the first question, so those in the audience be thinking about the questions you want to ask. But I actually have a question for Ambassador Rena Lee. So we've just heard some interesting thoughts from both Ambassador A.Webson and Secretary General Lodge on various multilateral efforts taking place under various instruments, including UNCLOS, CBD, ISA, the SDGs. So you are involved with some of these efforts in leading roles. How are these processes connected, and how can we better create synergies amongst them to better connect the dots rather than having them work in silos and duplicating efforts?
Well, thank you very much for that question, Peggy. I think that what the discussion today has brought out is that there are actually many people who are putting in the efforts to be able to contribute to the better governance of the ocean. And I think, I'm aware that many people may have questions to ask, so I'm going to keep it short. I think that one key thing that we can do to better connect the dots and to better coordinate our actions is information sharing. I think there are many people here I see in the audience today who have been involved in the BBNJ process and can attest to this. In the course of our negotiations, we've had many moments of enlightenment. Oh, I didn't know that this was being done, or oh, it seems like there's work underway there. And so that information sharing, finding a platform, and in the context of our negotiations, talking about the clearinghouse mechanism, finding that platform in which we can access this information and be able to understand what's going on out there in the areas beyond national jurisdiction, who's doing what, to ensure that we can tie up with the people who are undertaking action, so that we don't duplicate our efforts, we conserve our resources, and then we move ahead collectively. I think that will be one step forwards in coordination and coherence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. So now we are taking questions from the audience, and I know Yasmin is also in the audience to bring a microphone. Yes?
Good morning, everyone. Maria Seabed.
Just a second.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Maria Seabed. I'm a PhD in law environment. As a representative of a young research here led by UBO University, I would like to ask you a question, Professor, especially how do you plan, all of you especially, to engage research on this governance, on all those organisms that have been growing, and as we said, they are a part, and we want to know how we're supposed to be engaged on it, as with the ACPP or maybe a COP Ocean, we could be involved. How do you see us on this future, as we may say? Thank you.
Peggy, shall I take the question?
Yes, please.
So it's fantastic to have students here and people from the university, and I think it is very clear that this agenda that we're talking about here can only be brought forward by the next generation. So the involvement of early career ocean professionals is extremely important. In the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, we have a platform for early career researchers, and it's not only to discover more about the ocean, we've seen that we know bits and pieces of it, but also to understand how we can advance the legal regime, how we can engage the citizens, how we engage different actors from industry, civil society, and governments. And I do think we need new ideas and innovation, and what better than the next generation, the students coming in these debates and discussions and engaging with us, because it is about the future of humanity, and the ocean will play an important role, but it is really your future, the next generation's futures, that many of us are doing the work. So thank you for that intervention.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Visbeck, and thank you for the excellent question. We still have time for a few more questions.
I'm just concerned about time, so if we could have short questions and short answers, then we'll be more contributors towards time. Thank you.
Short answers, I'm not sure. Gaill from Surfrider Foundation Europe, we had a lot of mentions of the need to have a treaty against plastic pollution. We know we are some days ahead of UNEA. What would you like to see in this treaty? And in terms of prevention, what are your expectations in terms of preventative measures? Thank you.
So thank you for that question. I wonder, Secretary General Puna, would you want to address that?
Before I do, can I just add some comments to the previous question and answered by the professor? You know, at COP26, I was deeply impressed with the young warriors that were part of our delegation there. For me, they made so much difference. You see, with the young people, they're unrestrained by protocol, and what they say comes straight from the heart. And I thought that our young lady speaker from Samoa at the opening ceremony actually delivered what I consider to be the best speech at that opening ceremony, with all respect to other speakers. So involving young people is absolutely critical, because they must have a say in what happens. It's their future we're talking about after all. And I've certainly promised that the young people will be part of our delegation at future COPs from here on. It's not just a matter of recruiting them at the last minute, no. We have ongoing consultations with them in order to hear their views and have these inform the policies that we draw up. So thank you for that very important intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General Puna. Would someone like to address the question about UNEA and the plastics treaty?
I'm not a lawyer, but I can tell you that the plastic is a huge issue on land, and also much of the plastic ends into the ocean. So I think it is high time to come together for the governments and really work on a treaty. I'm very excited about the possibility that there will be a treaty emerging. I think the science is clear on that. I think the civil society is clear on that. Most people, if they see a stressor on the ocean, it is the plastic because it's so visible. It might not be the biggest problem, but we don't have any legal frame to abandon that. So I'm very excited about that new potential of a treaty, and I hope it's going to go forward strongly, Peggy, and I hope that COVID showed us once again that multilateralism is the only way to solve these global problems, and plastic pollution is a global problem, so it needs global tools, and I'm very much looking forward to the UNEO process.
Thank you so much, Professor, and I agree. I really hope that process moves forward quickly as well. We have 2 more minutes for questions. Anyone have a quick question that they'd like to address our eminent panel here? Sorry.
Good morning, all. Sam Collins here from Ocean Research Foundation, and I will be brief. I celebrate the comments on inclusion of youth in decision-making. But my question is a matter of urgency. It's more, we often talk about future generations and future livelihoods and future sustainable development, but how do we, in this decision-making year that we've talked about, how do we make the urgency felt from the decision makers? How do we make the ocean crisis be a very present issue as opposed to an issue for future deliberations and future tackling?
Excellent question, Sam. Thank you. I wonder if each of you can give a short answer to that.
Well, I think the fact that all of us are gathered here today and over the next few days, and and we've heard so many people talk about the necessity to conclude a treaty and to move forward and to actually take action, already reflects that there's a certain will that's amongst us, and there are many decision makers here amongst us, and they will take back this feedback and they will understand that it is important that we get a move on this. And so I think in terms of looking forward to the 4th session, certainly hope that we will make real progress in the 4th session.
Thank you for that question. You know, that question touches at the very heart of what we are trying to do in the Pacific. Because for us, climate change is here already, and we're already suffering the impacts of climate change. And we are doing what we can through some of the measures I've mentioned earlier to get the world's attention, to our plight. And we're hoping that by sharing these with you today and in the next couple of days, that we can all make a difference in order to bring about these urgent measures that we're talking about and that we desire for our future. Thank you.
What a wonderful question. What a wonderful question. I do think is a great opportunity this whole year, starting with this conference, many of the others that we heard about are coming, to really shine a light on the ocean and really speak out for the ocean and show to everybody on our planet how important the ocean is for the survival of humanity. It's not just for the coastal communities and the large ocean stakeholders next to me, but it's actually important for all of us on the planet. And I wish that you yourself with your colleagues can engage to really bring that ocean dimension forward on the urgency to look at the human-ocean interaction and to make that human-ocean interaction more sustainable. The ocean will be there for thousands of years to come, but it might not deliver the services that we need as humans. So it's really this ocean-human interaction that is so important, and I'm looking for that wave of urgency, that wave of reflecting on our own actions on the ocean and just showing how unsustainable they are and the transformation that we need. And rules-based management, what's better than that? And marine spatial planning, these are technical terms, but the urgency is there, and let's together work on that.
What a great ending to our question and answer period, and thank you so much for your thoughtful responses and the excellent questions from the audience. So with that, we are going to move on to our second panel on governance for the ocean as a global common. And in this panel, we'll hear from our eminent guests on calls to action to better protect our great last global common. To guide us here today, I'd like to introduce our first speakers, Ambassador Waldemar Coutts is the Director for Environment and Oceans of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile and has had a long career as a diplomat with the Chilean Foreign Service, including serving as the Chilean Chief Negotiator for Climate in multiple COPs. He was also Chile's ambassador to Norway and was responsible for organizing the second Our Ocean Conference held in Chile in 2015. Good morning, Ambassador. Also, we'll hear from Professor Tladi, who will be streaming live to us from Geneva. He's a professor of law at the University of Pretoria and also a member of the International Law Commission and formerly special advisor to the South African Foreign Minister. He also served as legal counsel to the South African Mission to the UN and has worked on governance issues since 2006. Welcome, Diri. There you are. And then we'll hear from Ms. Tanya Brodie Rudolph. Ms. Rudolph is an international environmental and ocean lawyer. She is the founder of a multidisciplinary sustainability advisory, passionate ocean advocate, and a research fellow at the Center for Sustainability Transitions in South Africa. And welcome, Tanya. So with that, I think we're going to start with the high seas. So we're going to start with you, Diri, Professor Tladi. And the high seas make up 64% of the total surface area of the ocean that's beyond national jurisdiction. It's really a quintessential global commons. UN governments are engaged, as we've heard today, in the final stages of negotiations for this BBNJ treaty. This is the first time in over 30 years that governments have gathered to negotiate a treaty related to the ocean and the first ever to address biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. So Professor Tladi, you have had a bird's eye view of the BBNJ negotiations, having represented South Africa at the beginning of the process. Can you tell us why this process began and also some of the key issues involved?
Bonjour à tous. Merci, Peggy.
Good morning, all. Thank you, Peggy. This is an extraordinary and very welcome opportunity for me, and I'd like to thank you for the invitation.
I wish I was there with you personally, but unfortunately I'm here, but it's still wonderful to be able to say a few words. I, like others who've spoken before me, am really excited about the prospects for a new ocean agreement under the Law of the Sea Convention. The theme of our topic here in this panel is governance of the ocean as a global concern. And this treaty that we've been talking about areas beyond national jurisdiction, reflects, for me, the very pursuit of this idea in a very explicit way. This proposed treaty has the potential to, if properly negotiated, of course, to reflect the very essence of solidarity, which is what is required if we are to govern the ocean as a global common. While the agreement that is currently being negotiated has 4 elements, you will know that there were in fact 2 big issues that gave rise to these discussions that we're having. So I'll just describe those issues really quickly. The first issue concerned conservation of the marine environment in areas beyond national jurisdiction. So if you think about areas within national jurisdiction, the state, under the Law of the Sea Convention, is entitled, in fact obliged to regulate and govern the marine environment. But who has that entitlement and obligation in areas beyond national jurisdiction? So under the framework of the Law of the Sea Convention, which persists, of course, each state is free to adopt measures for itself and for those that may fall under its jurisdiction. And of course, states can also get together and adopt joint measures. But this really encourages free riding and the plundering of resources by those with the capacity to currently exploit the resources of the ocean. And a situation which, for the scientists, will really reenact Hardin's famous tragedy of the commons, right? So that's the first thing that this agreement is intended to resolve, this plundering of the resources of the ocean. The second issue really concerned marine genetic resources in areas beyond national jurisdiction. So while, as we heard from Michael Lodge earlier, the Convention governs mineral resources in the areas beyond national jurisdiction as a global common. Common governance is less clear for marine genetic resources. Now, I personally believe that the Law of the Sea Convention also adopts a common approach, a common solidarity approach to marine genetic resources, but there are certainly others that believe that it adopts for marine genetic resources a first come, first serve approach, which is antithetical to this idea that we're talking about, an idea of governance as a global commons. In my own academic writing and in my years as a delegate for South Africa, I have advanced the idea, really felt the idea that these two issues, the conservation issues and the marine genetic resources issues, are really two sides of the same coin. And that what joins them together, what connects them together, is the sense of solidarity and shared responsibility. So solidarity and shared responsibility in protecting the ocean, which is our common heritage, but also solidarity and responsibility, a shared responsibility in ensuring that this common heritage of ours is for all our benefit. Merci beaucoup.
So, thank you, dear. You just hit on some of the reasons why these treaty negotiations are so complicated from both a policy and political perspective. From your view, what is needed to resolve these issues from a political standpoint?
I mean, I think the first thing that's needed, obviously, is political will, because I think we all know what the issues are. The question is there a political will? Is there a willingness to sacrifice to make sure that we get the kind of agreement that we need? So if you think about the conservation issues, are we willing to as a community, as a global community, to develop a system that will ensure that states are able to adopt effective marine protected areas, for example, with effective measures, and that is binding on all? The point that was made, I think, earlier by Ambassador Rena was that we need an agreement that is both effective, but also that's universal. So it doesn't make sense to have a really effective agreement which excludes those that are most likely to engage in the plundering of resources. So I think that's really the critical issue, the willingness to give of ourselves and to sacrifice for the betterment of the international community.
Well, thank you so much for your expert insights, Professor Tladi. And you heard it here. Those of you who represent governments in the room, it's political will we need, so that's why we're here. And with that, we're gonna move on, and thank you so much, Diri, for joining us. And we're going to now ask Ambassador Coutts to please give some of your perspectives based on your experience in Chile and in the global realm. Thank you so much.
I would like to thank the organizers, and in particular the French government.
Peggy, for having me here today. I don't know if we have much time or not, but I will go straight to the core of what you asked me. And I wish to start by highlighting our vision, because we believe that the different processes currently under negotiation within the United Nations are clearly interconnected. We've highlighted this many, many times during COP26. And I mean by that the process of climate change under the UNFCCC, the CBD and the 30% of land and sea protection by 2030, BBNJ, of course, and I would add to this list the elimination of harmful subsidies on fishing under the WTO. So therefore, we favor a comprehensive and holistic approach, underscoring the inescapable link that exists between them. Now, we need to break this silo mentality that prevails in these negotiations, as has been highlighted by some of the speakers today. And it's about maximizing benefits for climate, biodiversity, ocean, and humanity as well. Now, I would like also to share with you a proposal. We've made first steps to create a high seas MPA. And the context is obviously the objective of reaching a legally binding implementing UNCLOS agreement on BBNJ. Because as we know, there is a regulatory gap in ABNJ where large ocean areas do not have the necessary instrument of protection. Now, the future high seas treaty envisages the creation of a vast network of high seas MPA. And MPAs, as we know, stand as the most cost-effective way to protect the oceans accordingly to the best scientific evidence available. Now, in this line, we've been actively participating in the BBNJ process, and although we announced the creation of an MPA in a climate change context during the Climate Leaders Summit convened by President Biden last April 2021, we take these first steps in a process destined to create the first MPA in the high seas, and namely in the Nazca and Salas y Gomez ridges in the southeastern Pacific. I don't know if the organizers can project the slide, because it would highlight and better reflect what I mean by that. The Nazca, no, there they are, good. So the Nazca Ridge and the Salas y Gomez Ridge, and they are flanked by the Motu-Motu Hiva marine protected area, the Rapa Nui protected area, and the Nazca Desventuradas Marine Park that was created during the second Our Ocean conference that we organized in Chile in 2015. So you see, we've detected these two ridges as a very rich, ecologically or biologically significant area, and this under the CBD, of course. Now, this initiative contributes directly to the future role of regional fisheries management organizations in this agreement, and while the BBNJ negotiations address its future institutions, we have successfully introduced into the scientific program of the South Pacific Regional Fisheries Management Organization an item that envisages exploring conservation options and measures for Nazca and Salas y Gomez. And I think this is a very, very important milestone. And it is also convenient to highlight that SPERFMO is a very modern organization that integrates the precautionary principle and the ecosystemic approach. Now, why did we do this? Because we're convinced that the urgency underscored by IPCC is clear. No, and it should drive us all to take action. Secondly, because it's an initiative that emerges as a clear example of what I said, our vision, this comprehensive and holistic approach. And thirdly, because Chile, my country, already has protected 43% of its EEZ, which is the 10th largest in the world, and we believe that we have the responsibility to be at the forefront of ocean sustainability. Now, concluding, the call to action. Well, I wish to highlight the relevance of addressing climate change, as we did during COP26, and the link between climate change and the ocean, the role of the ocean in ocean sustainability, as we have in our role as member of the Ocean Panel, promoting the protection of 30% by 2030, highlight the importance of nature-based solutions. On the BBNJ process, we need strong diplomatic action on the next IGC4, putting aside delaying tactics and establishing effective negotiation modalities. It's about promoting actions focused not on the usual possible common minimums, but on consensus on acceptable maximums, reflecting high standards in favor of ocean conservation. Consequently, we call for a BBNJ text that allows for high environmental standards through an adequate environmental impact assessment procedure in areas beyond national jurisdictions. Now, we propose a multilateral decision procedure appointing a global mechanism that allows for the creation of a network of MPAs in the high seas in line with the principle of compatibility of the law of the sea. Now, through this, what we wish to do, we wish to ensure a balance between conservation and sustainable use of the ocean, which currently is practically non-existent. Until now, this has taken shape only in areas of the EEZ and under the responsibility of coastal states. In this regard, I wish to highlight again what was highlighted very clearly during COP26, the efforts of the Latin American region. We saw the presidents of Panama, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Colombia highlighting a large MPA. And obviously the efforts of my own country and Mexico as well. Finally, I wish to highlight Chile's commitment in reaching a IST's agreement with an integrative perspective, and also to inform you that on March we will have a new administration that is also as equally committed, because this is a matter of policy of state, and it will have a new name, turquoise policy, combining the green and the blue. So we will be there again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and congratulations on your turquoise policy and also the proposal for the Salas y Gomez and Nazca Ridges. And you've heard it here, the first call to action is for conclusion of a BBNJ treaty as soon as possible in 2022. So thank you, and with that, we are going to move on to Tanya, Brodie, Rudolph. And so we've heard today many ideas and various ongoing efforts taking place to address ocean problems in a more holistic way. And so I'd like to see if maybe you could give us an overview of a topic analysis on governance and how we can move towards a sustainable ocean. Thank you, Tanya.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm deeply honored to be here today. Could I have my slides, please? In preparing for this presentation, I had a powerful sense that we have been missing something. We have been managing the ocean as if it is pieces of a puzzle, which we can dissect and then reconstitute each with our own idea of how our particular piece fits back into the whole. But in reality, ocean governance is incredibly complex. There are multiple layers of law at different scales. We've heard about some of them today. There are multiple institutions managing the ocean and many sectors, all of which have competing demands and overlapping mandates. We've also heard today that the governance of the high seas in a formal and integrated way is still under negotiation. Many layers further complicates and fragment decision making, and all of this impedes action to protect the ocean. In reality, the ocean is one connected social ecological system. Thank you. The ocean is one connected social ecological system, intimately intertwined with climate and weather, biodiversity, and humanity. It is no longer appropriate nor astute to persist with governance approaches which have led us to the point where we are repeatedly breaking records of our own devastation of our planet. Something different is needed now. Transversality, coordination, and transparency of existing governance frameworks must be underpinned by coordinated transdisciplinary science. The transition to a sustainable ocean can be intentional and directed. This can save time and resources with an expanded effect. In addition, governments need a new form of policy making or another model which allows them to capture, anticipate, and engage with the future. We need to be able to predict what is going to be happening in the ocean. What would we prefer to happen in the ocean, and how do we get there? For this, we need proactive governance, which is based on strategic evidence, a holistic view of the challenges facing the ocean, and agility so that governance is capable of responding to change. We need integrative agendas that align public and private actors at all scales. And we need global targets that are integrated with one another, and we need some ocean targets too. How do we achieve all of this? There are several mechanisms that we could use to assist the processes that are already underway and create the shift to manage our ocean as one ocean commons. Firstly, we should have an ocean science assessment body that is focused on the ocean, that can look at underlying assumptions and risks and also continuously assess the state of the ocean so that it can inform future pathways that are created. We need to think about reconfiguring ocean governance as we know it. The current nation-state system is very heavy. It's not sufficiently agile or reflexive. We need something more effective than that. So a meta-governance structure of some type could implement and create frameworks from recommendations from a science body, which could then be implemented at a local and national scale in a context-specific way. We have examples of this from the FAO small-scale fisheries, for example, and the Man and Biosphere frameworks, which are already doing this kind of thing. It's very effectively. These frameworks need to be polycentric, inclusive, and flexible. And thirdly, we need to shift our focus. We need to be looking at this as one ocean. We need to be looking towards global stewardship of our one ocean. Climate change and ocean change are as important as one another. We cannot achieve a 1.5 degree target or the 2030 biodiversity goals or any of the SDGs without a healthy functioning ocean. We need to shift now, and we're all aware that we are at this point. We're at a crossroads where we need to stabilize climate and ocean change. And we need to do this through coordinated science, illuminating the path for policymakers and ocean actors. And in order to do that, we need what we have here today, which is brave, visionary leadership. So thank you to France for having this convention and for inviting us to be here to talk about this important issue today. Thank you so much. I'm going to be introducing the panel, the rest of the panel, the call to action to implement some of these ideas about an ocean commons and about a science body to support the road forward for an ocean commons. So I'm very honored to introduce the following members. Catherine Chabaud, a former sailor and the first woman to complete the Vendée Globe, and now an MP of the European Parliament. Admiral Bernard Rogel, former Chief of Staff of the French Navy. Vice Admiral Jean-Louis Fillon from the Institut de la Mer. Françoise Gaill, the Vice President of the Ocean and Climate Platform, and Ut Ridlier, President of the Institut Français de la Mer. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, and bonjour à tout le monde. Chers amis de l'océan, dear friends of the ocean, I hope my commitment to the ocean, to the waste I came across in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean 30 years ago, during my first single-handed race, at the time when no one was talking about the plastic that were invading the ocean. That day I didn't say to myself, where are the awful polluters? But how did we get there collectively? I then felt a sense of individual responsibility, my own responsibility, and collective responsibility, that of the states, but also that of communities, companies, and citizens. This is the feeling that we have today, we who are launching this call for action. Françoise, the oceanographer, Jean-Louis, the Navy Commissioner, Eudes, the ship owner, myself, the sailor, and the member of the European Parliament. We feel this way because, just like you, we realize that the ocean is one, is a global common for humanity. Un bien commun de l'humanité en français. C'est pas facile à traduire en anglais. But that is under threat. And we want to act to preserve this global common. So today we renew our 2018 call for recognition of the ocean as a whole, as a global common, at the service of humanity and under its responsibility. To implement this recognition, we propose 3 principles. First, we subscribe to the framework of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It is not a matter of rewriting this founding text, but of transcending its reading with an ethical and not a legal notion that gives responsibility preeminence over the principles of freedom and sovereignty. Secondly, ethical responsibility, both collective and individual, is exercised before humanity, that is to say, before the international community, nations, organizations, and living as well as unborn citizens. Third, it applies to all maritime spaces, including those under sovereignty and jurisdiction. By promoting the notion of global common, which can be embodied in many ways, we call for an evolution of ocean governance towards sustainable development so that it remains a source of life, wealth, and links, and contributes to the appeasement of international relations. Finally, we call for this notion of global common, encompassing the major issues related to the sea, to be translated into two governance tools that Françoise and Jean-Louis will present to us before Eudes concludes.
So, I am a scientist, and more specifically a deep sea biologist. And when one comes face to face with trash, not at the surface of the ocean, but at the bottom, like plastic bottles at 2,000 meter depths, what does one think? The thought that comes to mind is that we are undoubtedly responsible for this global degradation. We need to start changing our behavior today. But protecting the ocean is not just about marine ecosystem, because we now know that the ocean interacts with climate change and that biodiversity is being lost at an alarming rate in the ocean as well. What do decision makers need to do? Put policy responses in place now, such as by expanding highly protected marine areas. But what do we, scientists, need to do to answer this crisis? Share our knowledge to inform those responses, as Martin was telling us that before. Initiatives have already been developed to improve our knowledge on the ocean. This includes UN initiatives like the World Ocean Assessment, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development that we will see tomorrow, but also the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. But what we need now is a way to connect these approaches, to understand the interactions between all these phenomena, climate, biodiversity, pollution, human health, and their driver in order to consider the ocean as a whole. If we want to prevent the ocean's collapse and everything it does for us along with it, we now need to understand the changes it is undergoing and the habitat it will shape tomorrow. We need to understand how it will continue to change in the future. We should therefore create a scientific working group to structure an international plan on ocean change, or IPOC. And we must do it this year in order to deliver a first proposal before the next United Nations conference in Lisbon in June. The scientific community, in partnership with ocean users, from policymakers to civil society representatives, will bring together the world knowledge on the evolution of the ocean. This panel will inform an inclusive governance system that will protect the ocean as a global command for sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Françoise. Je vais essayer de vous montrer pourquoi
I'm going to try to explain why we need to completely revisit ocean governance.
Is not meeting today's challenges. It is facing two kinds of maritime problems. The first is in dealing vertically with various subjects. The second is a risk of stagnation. Obsolescence is becoming reality. The 40 years Holden Clause is a masterpiece of multilateralism. It represents an outstanding balance between freedom and the conquest of coastal areas while focusing on the marine environment. But since 1982, many major problems have become apparent. There is the implementation of SDG 14, the creation of MPA in ICES, iron fishing, plastic pollution, safety of submarine cables, and so on. Only regular meetings with all stakeholders will give lasting solutions. Maritime questions deserve being discussed and, I hope, solved in the context of one specific meeting instead of in multiple and non-coherent talks. So, simplifying ocean governance would avoid multiple meetings and United Nations ocean conferences could be the master matrix for such an evolution. It is, of course, out of the question to preempt all negotiations. Some topics must be discussed in specific meetings. Typically, I think of the climate COP and biodiversity COP. However, a simpler governance would be stronger and more visible. It is vital to group questions because we know that all maritime topics are closely interdependent. It would also be a new opportunity to involve civil society in governance. As a Navy officer who sailed all around the world, and now as a lawyer of the sea, I continue my commitment. And I believe strongly that we must change ocean governance to be able to preserve our global command. Thank you.
Juste quelques mots pour conclure.
Just a few words by way of
Just some
conclusion.
words to conclude our call for action, our call for 3 actions. First, to consider the ocean as a global command and therefore to adopt responsible individual and collective behaviors, do our best according to our possibilities and transcend the reading of the rule for better implementation. Perhaps BBNJ's preamble could be the first place to introduce the idea in an international agreement. Second, to establish a group of experts who share and challenge their knowledge, allowing us to base our action and decision on a robust and scientific foundation. And 3, to implement a central, active, open forum to exchange and decide on the new rules and practices responding to actual challenges. And even more briefly, what we are asking for is to believe in humans, to encourage them to play collectively without naivety, but with determination. Thank you.
Thank you so much, panel 2, and all of you for your exciting and creative calls to action that I hope we'll get some interesting questions from the audience about right now. So now we are opening up the session for 10 minutes of questions.
Peggy, sorry, we are so late that we won't be able to do 10 minutes of questions, but we are here together for 3 days, so I guess that after all these panels and workshops, we can still interact, and we are here for that, because I'm cautious about time, because we have 20 workshops coming after this, one after the other. But maybe, to be polite, I'm sorry to be unpolite, but I'm the guardian of time. Maybe we can take one short question and one short answer, just to keep up with our program, and then we would pass on to the next program. Thank you.
Thank you. Does it work? Yes. I feel the agency. I'm a forecaster. I'm delivering actionable data. I'm delivering the digital ocean. So we are transforming science into data to support decision makers. This is a great race. We have the best engineers, the best scientists, a race for technology if there is no guidance. So I'm asking you, what do you need? And I would like to know a bit more about this international panel for ocean change, because I feel that here we could find the guidance and the governance we need to go for the best technology, for the best information and relevant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was short.
Thank you for this question. I think that your question is about two things which are complementaries. We need ideas and we need tools also. And to have a good equipment for the future, I think we have to work together. It's not only the idea of something that we think the conceptual aspect for biodiversity, for example, but we need also all the data and the management of the data and the way in which we will be able to not only to imagine, but also to design a new way of governance for the ocean.
Thank you very much. Do we have time for any more questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and hopefully you can find our panelists in the margins of the meeting if you'd like to explore a little bit more. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashok to introduce some announcements.
Thank you so much, Peggy. I think we can clap hands to Peggy, who has done a fantastic job conducting this in such, we're on the same boat, right? Physically and symbolically. Thank you very much for coping with that. We have two announcements and two personalities that we wanted to recognize here. You are all our distinguished guests, but we would like to thank the University of Bretagne and Professor Denis Bailly. I don't see you. You're here, of course. Please, Denis, if you'd like to come on stage and share not only an announcement of the One Ocean University that you are conducting at the same time as the One Ocean Summit, but also speak about what is at stake here in Brest. And it's one of the reasons why Brest was chosen by the French presidency to host the first One Ocean Summit. It's because of the ecosystem. It's because of the scientists. It's because of also about the maritime naval base, and we would have, and I want to recognize him right now, the Chief of Staff of the French Navy, Admiral Pierre Vendier, who would also felicitate and address the audience, because this ecosystem in Brest is very particular, and that's what has brought us here, and that is what has brought us to you and to what you're doing with this fantastic environment. During all the sessions, we would have representatives of these eminent institutions, the Enviromer, the François Houllier, the IPEV and its director, Jérôme Chaplaz, and all of these actors and players who are very important in France, in Europe, would address the audience and interact with us. Professor Denis Bailly.
Merci beaucoup, Ashok.
Thank you very kindly.
If you allow me, I will make my statement in French. Je suis économiste à
I'm an
l'Université de
economist
Brest
at the
et
University of Brest,
j'ai l'honneur de
and
coordonner
it
ce
is
qu'on
my
appelle
honor
l'Ocean
to
University
coordinate what we
Initiative,
call the Ocean
qui porte pour
University
l'Université
Initiative,
de Brest
which for the
la
University of Brest
proposition de la création
is a
d'un
matter
institut de
of
l'Université des
creating
Nations Unies dédié au
an
thème
institute of the UN
Sciences et gouvernance de
devoted
l'océan et des
to
littoraux.
the topics of the science of the governance
C'est dans ce
of the
cadre que
oceans and
l'Université
littoral
de Brest
areas. The
a
University
répondu
of
très
Brest
volontiers à l'appel des organisateurs du sommet
immediately
pour que
replied
nos organisations, la One Ocean
affirmatively
Summit
that
University,
we were prepared to organize the One
c'est un groupe
Ocean Summit
international de
University.
jeunes
It's an international
chercheurs
group of
et
young
chercheuses
researchers
qui travaillent durement pour produire un appel à l'action.
who
Vous les avez
work to
entendus tout
drop
à
a
l'heure dans
call
la
to action.
session
You
questions-réponses.
heard them
Ils et
in
elles sont
the
présents pour
previous
intervenir dans
Q&A.
tous les ateliers
They are
et dans
on
l'archipel du
hand
campus
this
mondial de la
week
mer,
to
structure qui nous fédère tous,
contribute to
acteurs des
our
sciences et technologies de la
meetings
mer
this
ici
week.
sur Brest, et qui,
And
comme l'a rappelé Ashok,
as Ashok
justifie
has
la présence
reminded
de ce
us,
sommet ici.
this
Je vous
summit
demande de les
has
écouter,
been
d'écouter leurs messages, d'aller à leur rencontre.
welcomed
Il
here
a
in
été
Brest
dit,
for a very
la
good reason.
jeunesse, c'est
Youth
sur elle que nous pouvons compter, que nous devons compter.
is the future
Au-delà de
of
ce rendez-vous de Brest,
humanity,
nous
and
porterons ensemble le rappel
beyond
à la conférence
this
des
summit
Nations
of Brest, we will
Unies qui
be
se réunira à Lisbonne en juin.
taking our
Je voudrais aussi partager avec
contributions
vous
to the Lisbon
quelques
meeting this summer.
initiatives que
I
nous
would like
menons
to share
dans un
with
projet,
you
qui s'appelle
a few
Sargano, financé
initiatives
par le Fonds
that
français
we have
pour
undertaken as
l'environnement
part
mondial
of
avec des
the
partenaires,
Sargano
l'OFB ici en
Sargadome
France,
project
Marviva au
with
Costa Rica, le secrétariat de la mer des
Rica,
Sargasses.
Secretary of the Sargasso
Tout
Sea,
le monde ici
and
est
other
pour
contributors.
rappeler
Everyone
que nous
is
voulons un
here
traité
to recall
ambitieux,
that we
un
want
traité
to work
BBNJ
for
ambitieux.
an ambitious BBNJ
Je vous
agreement.
propose que nous
And
n'attendions pas l'institutionnalisation
I'm
de
calling
décisions qui
for
n'en doutons pas
immediate
seront
action. We
prises,
cannot
Madame la
wait
Présidente,
any longer,
à New
Madam
York
Chair.
dans
We
quelques
cannot
semaines.
wait until
Cet
the New
appel,
York
c'est pour que l'on
meeting
commence à
to
travailler
act. This is a
avec celles
call
qui se,
for
nous avons
action.
entendu le Chili,
We have
qui
heard
aujourd'hui
Chile.
sont dans les starting
Today
blocks
they are
pour faire
prepared
déclarer,
to
faire
act,
reconnaître,
to
mettre en œuvre un certain nombre
implement
d'aires marines protégées en haute mer.
the
Je voudrais
creation
ici faire
of a number
référence
of
à l'appel
high seas
lancé par
marine
plusieurs pays
protected
d'Amérique
areas,
centrale
several countries of
dans
Central
le
America.
sillage du Costa Rica pour la reconnaissance du dôme thermal
Following
comme
Costa
une
Rica's
zone
initiative,
unique en termes de
calling for the creation of a
mais
thermal
surtout comme
zone,
un laboratoire unique où nous
which
devons
will
penser
serve as a
l'articulation d'une
unique laboratory
gouvernance
where we
entre
will
la
be
haute mer et les zones économiques
orchestrating
exclusives.
our
Et
governance
ceci est un
between the high
véritable défi.
seas and
Nous devons
exclusive
penser une
economic
conservation
zones.
dans un espace dont la variété
Conservation
spatiale et
must
temporelle est
be
unique, et c'est un
designed
autre défi.
in a new way to address the requirements of the protection of our
Qui sont
oceans.
présents, mais en particulier
Many
l'Union européenne,
of those countries present, and particularly those countries of the
adhérer,
European Union,
à rejoindre
called
la
upon
déclaration d'Hamilton
to support the
soutenir les
Hamilton
efforts engagés
Declaration, to
de
support
nombreuses années,
the
depuis
efforts
plusieurs
that have been
années,
undertaken
pour faire la démonstration en haute mer, dans
to,
la mer des Sargasses, ce qu'il est
demonstrate
possible de
that
faire
the
en
Sargasso
termes de
Sea
gouvernance,
is
en
a
termes de
perfect
science, en termes de
illustration
connaissances,
of
en termes
what
d'engagement
we
de
can
chacun.
do in
Et
terms
ceci
of
est un appel
governance,
appuyé,
knowledge,
en
and
direction de l'Union
commitment
européenne,
of
et en
the
particulier
various
de la
stakeholders.
présidence française du
And
Conseil.
we're calling
Et
on
enfin,
the French
dans un
presidency
appel à
to
la
support
mobilisation des
these
structures en
efforts.
sciences sociales, je suis chercheur en sciences
I'm
sociales.
also a researcher in
Il
the
nous faut
area of the
penser la
social
gouvernance de
sciences, and we
l'océan
need
bien
to
commun.
consider
L'appel
the
vient d'être
governance of the ocean
voudrais
as
attirer
our
votre attention
global commons.
sur
I'd like to call your
l'importance de
attention
construire des
to the
règles,
importance of
des institutions,
devising rules,
des espaces
creating
de décision
institutions,
qui
and
soient démocratiques,
decision-making
légitimes
areas
et
which are
comme il a été
democratic,
agir.
legitimate,
Parce
and
que nous devons
agile, as we've
inventer
just heard, because
l'adaptabilité,
it falls
la
to us to
négociation,
invent, to
tant au
adapt,
niveau
to
local qu'à
negotiate,
l'échelle
both
globale.
locally
La
and
démocratie
globally.
maritime reste à
Marine
inventer, et ce doit
democracy
être la mission, le point de
remains
départ
to be
de ce sommet.
devised, and this is the
Dans ce
starting
cadre,
point
les
of this
objectifs de développement
summit.
durable que sont les droits des communautés,
The
les
SDGs,
justices sociales
the
et
rights of
environnementales,
communities,
l'égalité de
environmental
genre ne
justice,
sont pas seulement pour des
gender
déclarations de
equality,
salon.
these Oceans are not mere
Elle nous oblige à construire un ordre plus juste. Les communautés
instruments.
côtières,
They require
d'usagers
genuine
directs et
commitment. There are
historiques de la mer
millions of
sont les
direct
premiers impactés
beneficiaries
par les décisions qui vont être
of the
prises.
seas, and they will be immediately impacted by any decisions that are made in this regard. It's not enough
Il faut garantir leurs droits,
to give
comme
them
l'affirme par exemple
opportunity to express themselves. We have to act to ensure that their interests are protected. Thank you very kindly.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Et avec, je vais enchaîner en français.
Thank you very kindly.
Je parle aussi français. Merci beaucoup, professeur.
Thank you, Professor.
La même dynamique, on peut accueillir l'amiral Bernard Rogel, qui, avec l'amiral Pierre Vendier, vont nous donner quelques indications sur la vision de la marine,
provide us with the Navy's view of
et puis ensuite,
these matters of governance.
introduira
And
un mot de
then
conclusion.
Peggy will say a few words of conclusion.
Qui est le Undersecretary General,
Françoise is the Undersecretary General for Legal
at the
Affairs
United Nations
for Council.
the Law of the Sea, qui conclura cette session. Je ne suis pas sûr d'arriver au bout de son film, mais on va essayer. After this, you have like 10 minutes before the other programs, and I just want to announce that 4 times per day at the hot spot in between the 2 staircases, there's 20 minutes sessions and debates. So while you're passing by, the restaurant is very close by as well. Please do stop in this agora form of calls and recommendations as well. Amiral Bernard Roger.
I am very pleased to be with you today for one reason. I was born a few years ago in Brest, and I live now in Brest after 44 years in my Navy. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you in my splendid region of Brittany. So now, as a French admiral, I have to speak French. Sorry for that. Le 21e siècle sera
The
maritime.
21st century will be maritime. That is what was said by the French president at the Convention for the Sea in 2019. And it's true that there are so many challenges facing us that they will definitely, in the near future, take on even more importance. This concerns, first of all, maritime flows, which have been multiplied by 4 in the past 40 years. Those maritime paths have become true arteries of trade. We also have to so we have to plan for future action on the sea. Demographic growth is also going to be forcing people to move towards the sea more and more. And some of these activities, I believe, will be the major challenge for the next century. Today, we can make 2 observations, 2 different observations, which are very closely linked. The first observation is that we are currently observing from the China Sea to the Mediterranean and soon to be all the way to the Arctic. We are seeing unforeseen competition for the seas, and sometimes even going as far as forceful usage. The sea is no longer just a passage, it's now a new frontier. The second observation that we have to be careful has to do with the increase of actions in sea, and it has to do with the environmental consequences. The oceans are our essential matrix and a common good of humanity, but they are in danger. They're in danger because of pollution, because of a certain number of factors like climate change. And so we must act, and we must be intransigent in the respect for international law, because otherwise we may find ourselves with even more dangerous deregulation from an environmental point of view. But we also have to reinforce the international law where it's necessary to regulate activity on the sea, to survey what happens, and make sure that we protect the seas and the oceans. We need to be more and more vigilant because we are going through multilateral crises and crises of dialogue, which are increasing the relations of strength. So what about Navy and activity. The Marines are involved in preserving peace for the security of all. There's no trade without security, and there's no environmental work without security, but there's no, all of this requires surveillance. Ocean conservation is at the heart of the Navy's work. First of all, for us as France, we are working with other administrations to fight against illegal fishing and to combat pollution, to fight against trafficking, and to rescue people in distress. And we have the possibility to do this where other authorities cannot. Secondly, environmental damage is also often the cause of health crises. The explosion of illegal activities and other activities can lead to future crises. So protecting the oceans, protecting the environment also is a question of protecting peace. And there's a third reason. The young sailors that we recruit today are very aware of the environmental challenges we're faced with, and some of them maybe would not join the Marines and the Navy if they were not aware of that. And to conclude, to not go beyond my time limit, I have two short messages. First of all, we must give the navies the necessary legal tools that they need to reinforce their action, and the work to be done in this summit is essential. Second, it's also essential that we have the necessary resources to ensure the surveillance necessary to protect our oceans. Otherwise, all will be in vain. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll be hearing from Admiral Carpentier, and I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity to greet the Assistant Secretary,
and who would share also a few words of conclusion, as we decided very recently. We're very honored to have you with us, and merci, Amiral, aussi d'être là et de représenter ce que vous représentez.
Thank you, Admiral, for being with us and for representing what you represent, and for representing the maritime affairs. Thank you very much.
My former boss has enforced the rule, and so I will speak in French too. Donc, merci, Amiral. Je vais vous représenter.
Thank you, Admiral. I'm going to be
par le user's case, par le cas d'usage,
using a user's case presentation to talk about environmental security. The National Marine has a very vast panel of responsibilities that goes from military protection to environmental protection. And the French Marines has specific responsibilities in regards to actions on the seas. And we have a maritime prefect which covers all of the French ocean seas and for non-military actions. And we use military resources for those non-military actions. And this is because other administrations would not be able to do the same thing. So we use commandos, and we use the military structure to do complicated things like seizing drug cargoes and fight against illegal fishing, which can sometimes be very violent and requires military know-how. All of our commanders master the legal tools that enable us to go from the legal aspect to the military aspect. To give you a few examples, we participate in surveying fishing, not only in French waters, but also in foreign waters. For example, in the Guinea Gulf, 600 ships were checked this year. We also participate in supporting scientific campaigns. We work with we work to help bring supplies to the Antarctic lab. We also participate with the Sorbonne University to the development of prototypes for sensors to analyze organic life in the ocean, because we want to be able to, if we had sensors on all of the ships sailing the ocean, we would be able to anticipate what's coming. The environment also has a military interface, and we have conflicts. We see conflicts of use and problems with fishing rights. We also see there are also problems with rising sea levels in the Pacific, especially. And as we heard earlier, there are extreme climate events where the military can come to support civilian populations. We, as military actors, know that competition, we see the competition which is becoming greater and greater. There are the three spaces, there's cyberspace, maritime space, and the atmospheric space, and all three of them are seeing increased competition, and technology is important, and there is a very predatory aspect, and these are immense spaces that are very difficult to control. These spaces are common spaces, belong to everyone and no one. They're far from civilian spaces, and they are places for potential military combat. There's a true armament, which is unprecedented since the end of the Cold War. These are places where law is easy to circumvent, and it's very difficult to control. So we have to reinforce the legal arsenal in order to guarantee that sustainable development and biodiversity be protected. The navies can help to characterize subjects through the use of these sensors. We also have a lot of intelligence tools, so we can participate in characterizing various aspects of these different spaces. And finally, where our force comes from unity, and it's very pleasing to see that this awareness of the importance of the environment is growing everywhere. France is now at the chair of the IONS, the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, which is a cooperative program, and this is an Indian initiative where countries that could potentially be warring against each other, for example, the Indians and the Pakistani, working together, are sitting at the same table and working on finding solutions and coming up with a final assessment. And this is very reassuring to see. And this is a... So to conclude, the National Navy, in cooperation with its partners, is very much involved in environmental security. Our young people who are joining the Navy are very aware of the environment. They're in constant surveillance. They look at what's happening. They observe, and so this is something that's really taken into account by our navies. And we take the military are involved throughout the world because the sea is their working space, and they love it just like you do.
Magnifique. Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Admiral.
We're going to change a little bit the order, and Assistant Secretary Medina, if you would like to start by closing with your remarks that we really treasure, and we expected you so much. We're so happy that you made it and you're with us for 3 days, Monica Medina. And then we would close the session with the video that Miguel Suarez has sent us from New York. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashok, and thank you, everyone. This has been such an incredible panel, so rich, such a rich discussion, so many experts. It's hard to conclude it all, but I want to just say a few things. First, I want to thank the government of France for hosting this and for inviting us Americans here to join your party. It's wonderful to be part of the discussion. And we come together, as we've said over and over this morning, at a critical time for the ocean, a time of great urgency where we need to take action. We know what the threats are. We've heard about them from all the panelists. We know what is at stake. And the question is, will we meet the moment? Do we have the political will? Can we collectively summon the political will that we need to take this moment and make it the decisive one where we turn the tide on ocean conservation? I'm here to say that the United States is a willing and very engaged partner in this undertaking, and it is, I think, one where we can. I'm very hopeful. We have this wonderful negotiation led by Ambassador Lee, where we will hopefully conclude, and I believe we will conclude a treaty, an international agreement this year on areas beyond national jurisdiction. And then I will take a point from our guest from Chile and say that I'm convinced that we will create more marine protected areas in the ocean than ever, because we will have this great agreement and we will have the ambition of the Chileans and many others like the United States around the world who've created marine protected areas. We need more of them. I also think it's a year where we'll elevate our ambition on illegal fishing and other illegal activities in the ocean, because we will have this great agreement and we will create more marine protected areas that protect areas that then can be enforced. And finally, I believe that we will conclude, or we will begin an important negotiation on plastic pollution in a month in Nairobi. So this is an important year, and this conference kicks off this important year. And so I just want to say, more than anything, Ashok, thank you, to your government for kicking off this important year. We have the BBNJ negotiation. We have more marine protected areas. We have our ocean conference that our government is sponsoring in April, where hopefully we'll make more of these announcements. We'll start the plastic pollution negotiation. We have the UN meeting on oceans. We have the General Assembly in September, and then we have the climate meeting in November. If we can't do it this year, I don't know when we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Melinda. Thank you so much for these very dynamic words. We will close with the video. I'm not sure we will be able to go till the end of the video and the message of Miguel Suarez. Please understand and bear with us. The program is continuing. There's a fantastic workshop on sustainable tourism with our friends from the UNEP who are waiting. So if we can put immediately the film, and I'll thank you now itself, all of you, all our eminent speakers and panelists. Thank you, Peggy, very much for conducting this workshop, and not only that, for mediating for some months, actually. We took 3 months to do the whole One Ocean Summit, and 3 months also to put this workshop together with a number of hours of Zooms and of visual discussions. Thank you so much, Ambassador Rena Lee, for coming. Thank you so much, Secretary General Mr. Henry Puna, for being with us from so far away from the Pacific. There's so much to be discussed on the Pacific, and we're going to still interact. And thank you very much, Matthias. We'll go to New York and to the UN as we are wrapping up and closing. Thank you all. Thank you.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to congratulate the President Macron and the government, French government, for this initiative of organizing this One Ocean Summit. It's a pleasure for me to tell you to do this conclusion on ocean governments. This is all the more true because I play a focal role at the UN Ocean Coordination agency. We work on oceans and coastal areas. We have 29 entities regarding the oceans and the seas.
As the super year for the ocean, and with reason. A number of significant ocean-related processes and meetings will take place under the auspices of the United Nations with the aim to strengthen ocean sustainability. And let me highlight but a few. I will start with processes established by the General Assembly, which is the global institution having the competence to undertake annual reviews of ocean affairs and the law of the sea. As such, it is uniquely positioned to give effect to the fundamental principle laid down in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea that, I quote, "The problems of ocean space are closely interrelated and need to be considered as a whole." End of quote. It is important to recall that the Assembly reaffirms annually that the Convention sets out the legal framework within which all activities in the oceans and seas must be carried out. Indeed, the Convention and its implementing agreements provide a comprehensive set of provisions regulating the extent and uses of all maritime spaces, including areas beyond national jurisdiction, namely the high seas and the international seabed area. Against that background, the fourth session of the Intergovernmental Conference on an International Legally Binding Instrument under UNCLOS on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction will convene. The 2022 United Nations Ocean Conference will be held on the theme Scaling Up Action Based on Science and Innovation for the Implementation of Goal 14, Stocktaking, Partnerships and Solutions. Both that conference and the United Nations open-ended informal consultative process on ocean and the law of the sea, which will focus on the theme Ocean Observing, are expected to make important contributions to the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. Strengthening the global science policy interface on oceans, bodies under the regular process for global reporting and assessment of the state of the marine environment, including socio-economic aspects, will continue to advance the critical work to prepare the Third World Ocean Assessment to be released in 2025. In relation to the sustainability of fisheries, states parties to the United Nations Fish Stocks Agreement will focus on the implementation of an ecosystem approach to fisheries management. A workshop to take stock of the implementation of General Assembly resolutions addressing the impacts of bottom fishing on vulnerable marine ecosystems and the long-term sustainability of deep-sea fish stocks will also be held. Bodies under the Convention will also continue meeting to support its implementation. And this includes the meeting of states parties and the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. The latter will advance its critical work to make recommendations to coastal states on matters related to the establishment of the outer limits of their continental shelf. The annual marking of World Oceans Day on the 8th of June will focus this year on the theme Revitalization, Collective Action for the Ocean. Finally, 2022 will also mark the 40th anniversary of the adoption and opening for signature of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, an instrument dear to my heart as my office performs the functions of the Secretary General under the Convention. Celebratory events to make this anniversary will provide opportunities to reinvigorate global multilateralism for ocean sustainability in an inclusive and multidisciplinary manner. The importance of the Convention and its effective implementation in good governance and in the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as well as of our common agenda, released in September last year by the Secretary General, cannot be emphasized enough. In that context, engagement between and among various actors and stakeholders on ocean-related initiatives within and outside the United Nations system will be critical to enhance the coordination and consistency with current processes and mandates, including those related to governance of the global commons. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in concluding this workshop, I wish to re-emphasize the call for the full and effective implementation of the Convention and its implementing agreements, for renewed commitment to existing ocean-related processes, and critically for stepping up efforts, including funding, to develop and strengthen the required capacity to achieve ocean sustainability. Merci. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think we can applaud all our speakers while we're leaving. And thank you, Peggy. Peggy. Thank you.
I wanted you to be uploaded. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ashok.